Friends and viewers, Alexander Pushkin, one of the Russians' best poet and a very famous one perhaps, he had written a poem, The Bronze Horseman. The name of this poem is The Bronze Horseman by Alexander Pushkin. It is published in 1841. Bronze Horseman, let me tell you about this, about the background of this poet and also about this poetry. A St. Petersburg stories, and this is the story of a St. Petersburg, is a narrative poem of 19th century Russian dramatist, novelist Alexander Pushkin, who is considered Russia's greatest poet. It was written in 1833 but was not published until 1841. After Pushkin's death due to censorship of Pushkin works by the Russian government, regarded as one of the Pushkin's most accomplished work, The Bronze Horseman has had a marked influence on Russian literature. The poem tells of the founding of St. Petersburg, Russia's cultural and artistic capital, in 1703 by Tsar Peter the Great, who ruled Russia from 1682 to 1725. The poem also focuses on a tragic event in the city's history, the Great Flood of 1824. Another feature of the poem is the Bronze Horseman, a statue of Peter the Great which was completed in 1782. The poem used the building of St. Petersburg on the marshy banks of the Neva River and the city's history and place in the development of Russia, to explore themes such as human conflict with nature and the clash between collective and state interest and the welfare of individual. So let me tell you about the Alexander Pushkin. He born in an aristocratic family on the 26th of May 1799 in Moscow, Russia. From 1811 to 1817, he attended a school for privileged children in St. Petersburg, then the capital of Russia, where he showed an interest in literature. At the school, he excelled at writing poems, completing about 130 as a student. Pushkin's first narrative poem, a romantic title, Rosalind and Lyudmila, was published in 1820 when he was 21 years old. Some of his other poetry, however, had a revolutionary flavor which offended authorities as punishment. Pushkin was sent away from the capital to southern Russia in 1820, working as a minor government official. He wrote The Prisoner of the Caucasus in 1820-1821, a narrative poem that was heavily influenced by English romantic poet Lord Byron. In 1823, he was transferred to Odessa, port city of Black Sea, but the following year the government suspected him of being an atheist and sent him into exile on his mother's estate, Mekhloskovia, in the northern Russia. The 2 years he spent there was a productive period for Pushkin, during which he wrote the tragedy Boris Godunov and the Count Nulin in a comic narrative poem. In 1826, after a personal meeting with Tsar Nicholas I, 1796 and 1855, Pushkin was released from exile. The Tsar promised to be Pushkin's personal censor, which Pushkin thought would free him from more onerous bureaucratic censorship. This proved not to be the case. Pushkin still had to ask permission before publishing anything. Traveling in 1838, he did, however, receive permission to publish Boris Godunov, The Tales of Balkan and the Other. In 1831, Pushkin married 16-year-old Natalia Gonchorovia, who was already a socialite renowned for her beauty. They had 3 children together. Although the marriage was not a happy one, Pushkin experienced financial difficulties in 1830, and he wrote less poetry through the Bronze Horseman. A product of his period is 1836. Pushkin founded the literary magazine, The Contemporary, which championed, among other work, of another Russian literary master, Nikolai Gogol. Pushkin's life was cut short by tragedy. His wife continued to have many admirers after marriage. One of them was French emigre George Charles Satins. Angered by rumor of an affair, Pushkin challenged Dianthis to a duel, which took place on January 27 in 1837. Dianthis was slightly wounded, but Pushkin, who was shot in the stomach, died 2 days later on January 29. So Pushkin, this is the Bronze Horseman. Let us come to the Bronze Horseman. What is here in the summary of this poem? The poem consists of nearly 500 lines and is divided into 3 sections: an introduction, part 1 and part 2. In the introduction, an unnamed man, later identified as Peter the Great, stands on the marshy banks of the Neva River and conceives his desire to build the city of St. Petersburg. The only things there now are a few fishermen huts surrounded by forest. The man envisioned a city that will protect Russia against potential enemies, such as Sweden. People, all nations will come as guests. A century later, the city was replaced marsh and forest. The city is impressive and architecturally stunning, with large mansions, towers, and flourishing port where ships from all over the world dock. The river banks are now encased in a granite and edged by bridges and gardens. St. Petersburg is even more splendid than Moscow. The poem's speaker loves the city that the Peter the Great built. The speaker enjoys sitting in his room at dusk, reading and writing. He loves the cold winter when he watches the sledges on the frozen river. He loves going to balls and bachelor dinners where the drinks flow freely. He also loves it when the city is on the war footing and soldiers and horses assemble and flags fly. He loves to hear guns roaring in military salute when the empress give birth to a son, or when Russia celebrate a war victory. Addressing the city directly, the speaker tells it to be the steadfast, so that it continues to subdue the element, and so that the water of the Gulf of Finland cannot trouble it. Then he recalls a bad event that happened to the city in the past. In part 1, rain falls on the city one November night. A young man named Yevgeny returned home from his friend's house. He is a poor clerk who works in an office. That night, he lies awake, worried about his financial straits and lack of opportunity. His life is so unlike that of aristocrats who have wealth and ease, even though they do nothing to deserve it. Yevgeny is also aware that river is rising in the storm and the city may get cut off, in which case he will not be able to see his girlfriend Parasha. He dreams of marrying her. Finally, he falls asleep. At dawn, the city floods. People flee their homes as the water rises. Waist-high houses were ruined, and coffins float down the street, released from the graveyard by the water. Tsar Alexander, his sober mood, surveyed the destruction of the city. Even the palace is affected by it, and the Tsar sends out men by boat to save as many people as they can. Yevgeny sits on one of 2 lion statues in Peter's square, gazing into the distance, trying to make out the cottage where Parasha lives with her widowed mother. All he sees is water everywhere, Behind him stands the statue of Peter the Great on a horse. In part two, the flood is receding. Yevgeny runs to the still raging river and hires a boat. The boatman steers through rough water to the other shore. Yevgeny runs to where Parasha lives. Devastation is everywhere. Houses have been destroyed and corpses lie in the street. Yevgeny can find no trace of Parasha's home. By dawn, the flood is receded and the city is calm again. The streets are filled with people going about their businesses. Yevgeny, however, can find no peace. For weeks he wanders around, distraught. One summer night, sleeping on the embankment, he is awakened by rain and wind. Sounds that bring the fateful night of the flood back to him. He goes to Peter's Square and contemplates the statue of Peter. Yevgeny is filled with anger, blaming Peter the Great for building the city on the marsh and therefore liable to flood. He curses and threatens the former Tsar and runs off. Suddenly he hears horse hooves behind. Yevgeny thinks that the statue is chasing him and tries to escape. The chase goes on all night. From the day on, whenever he returns to the square, Yevgeny feels fear and anguish. As a result of the flood, a battered cottage floats out to a small island. It is implied, although not explicitly stated, that it is Parasha's cottage. In the spring, workmen arrive to haul away the wreckage and find the remains of Yevgeny near the hut. They bury him in a simple funeral. So this is the summary and the nutshell of this poem, The Bronze Horseman. Now let us see what is the theme of this poem. The Bronze Horseman by Alexander Pushkin. The theme involved in this poem is humans versus nature. The poem juxtaposes humans and nature are two mighty opposites contending for supremacy of each. Each battles the other in a forceful back and forth. The area around the mouth of Neva River seems a very inhospitable place for human habitation. Only a few poor people eke out a living there. Then comes Peter the Great with a stupendous vision and the power to carry it out. Atop swamp and forest, St. Petersburg rises up in such a splendor the narrative called it one of the wonders of the world. Man has subdued the river into a scenic spectacle for human enjoyment. The narrator writes warmly of the Nava's anguishingly flowing water, decorating the city majestically. But although humanity has its years of triumph, nature only seems to be tame. In fact, it bides its time, and when opportunity presents itself, the river rises up. The poem personifies the water as a malevolent force with an ill will toward the city, descending it as seeking vengeance, lying in wait to strike like thieves, breaking into the houses, and as behaving like a mighty beast that escaped from the cage and wants to kill everything in sight. The rising, raging water cannot be stopped. All the splendor of St. Petersburg is overwhelmed in a few hours. So, ladies and gentlemen, The Bronze Horseman. This is a very beautiful poem by Alexander Pushkin, a great Russian poet. I hope you will enjoy it when you go through it. Thank you very much.